The winter ball had come to Redcrest like a dream carried across dust and desert, arriving in silks, polished boots, and the glitter of chandeliers that swayed gently above the grand hall of the governor's house. Outside, the wind dragged sand across the packed thoroughfare, rattling shutters and whispering over the rooftops, but inside, violins played waltzes imported from distant cities, and the candlelight glowed warm enough to make one forget how cold the night had become. It was the finest event the territory had seen in years, spoken of for weeks in advance. Invitations delivered by horsemen, gowns sewn in haste, boots polished to mirrors. It was a night meant for promise and spectacle. Evelyn stood near the edge of the ballroom floor, her gloved hands folded neatly, the faintest rise of nerves tracing her breath. She wore a gown of soft, pale blue, not new, but carefully altered to fit her with gentle precision. She had done the stitching herself, every seam a quiet testament to patient hope. She did not belong to wealth. She had come west under the guardianship of relatives who saw her more as a practical burden than a member of the family. Yet her bearing was gentle, composed, touched with a quiet dignity no amount of fortune could purchase. Her eyes lifted when he entered. The Duke. He was spoken of with reverence in the salons of New York and with or among the ranchers and miners who glimpsed him only from a distance. His title carried weight, but it was his presence that held the room. Tall, with a posture shaped by discipline and inheritance, he moved with the quiet command of a man who need not announce himself to be noticed. His coat was tailored to perfection, dark as midnight, with a single silver pin glinting at his collar, not for decoration, but for lineage. The music did not stop, yet the tempo seemed to still. He saw her. Their eyes met, no startled glance, but a recognition soft and familiar, shaped by months of shared conversation in shaded verandas and quiet walks along the riverbank that traced the edge of town. He had sought her company often, though always with the dignity and reserve expected of his station. Still, when he approached her now, the memoirs began. She stands beside him as though they are already promised. I heard she has no dowry. A pretty face only stretches so far. It is convenient for him. She will always be grateful. The whispers rippled like wind across a wheat field, too soft to be addressed, too sharp not to be felt. Evelyn kept her chin poised, though her pulse faltered. She had long understood that their closeness was a delicate bridge suspended over the expectations of society. The Duke halted before her, his expression composed, yet his gaze softened as though the room had narrowed to just the two of them. May I have this dance? His voice was low, even. Her breath caught, though she did not allow it to show. You may, she replied, and placed her hand in his. The warmth of his glove against her palm steadied her. They moved to the center of the floor, and as the music rose, their steps aligned with a familiarity that no instruction could teach. He guided without insisting. She followed without yielding. There was a quiet conversation in the way he looked at her, gentle yet searching, and for a moment, just a moment, she felt as though the world had balanced itself. But society does not allow happiness to settle unchallenged. As they danced, a cluster of ladies near the long table of spiced cider and sugared pears leaned close, their voices trained to seem accidental. She attaches herself to him with such eagerness. More likely he indulges her out of boredom. Men of his rank do not marry for affection. A laugh, delicate and cruel. She behaves as though she were his wife already. The words struck harder than any slap. Evelyn's step faltered, not visibly, but he felt it. His hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist, as though reassuring her to continue. She did, though her heart had begun to fracture in small, invisible ways. When the waltz came to its final turn, the Duke released her slowly, as if reluctant for the moment to end. They stood close, too close for propriety, but society held its breath to see what would happen next. Before either could speak, a voice, light as lace and sharp as a blade, slid through the air. Such devotion, said Lady Harding, a woman adorned in jeweled satin. One could almost mistake you for his bride. The hall stilled. Evelyn's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with the effort of maintaining composure. The Duke did not look away. He did not correct. He did nothing. Silence settled between them. His eyes softened with a regret that came too late. Evelyn lowered her gaze, the movement graceful, practiced, dignified, a retreat not of defeat, but of understanding. She curtsied with quiet elegance. If you will excuse me." She walked away, her steps unhurried, though her chest felt hollow. No one stopped her. No one needed to. The humiliation had already been neatly and efficiently delivered. Behind her, the Duke stood in the golden light of the ballroom, surrounded by admiration yet entirely alone. And though neither spoke of it, something fragile between them had cracked, not shattered, but begun to splinter. The night continued, music swelling once more, laughter returning, conversations shifting like smoke, and yet the Duke did not dance again. Outside, the wind swept across the darkened street, carrying dust, memory, and the beginnings of a storm. Evelyn paused beyond the ballroom doors, where lantern light flickered on cold walls. She drew a slow breath, steadying herself against expectation. She had known admiration could mimic affection, and affection could resemble promise, yet knowing did not spare her. She understood the cruelest pain was not rejection, but being treasured only in shadows that night. The days following the winter ball unfolded with a quiet, aching restraint, as if the entire town of Redcrest held its breath. Snow dusted the rooftops at dawn, melting into muddy ruts by afternoon. Riders came and went along the main road, their horses' hooves striking rhythm against wooden boards. The saloon bustled, the church bells tolled, and still the memory of that night persisted like smoke that could not be cleared from a room. Evelyn carried herself through it all with careful composure. Wherever she went, market, chapel, sewing circle, the whispers followed her like a poly-trained dog, never loud enough to address, never soft enough to ignore. She did not blame the Duke for his silence at the ball. She told herself that over and over. He was a man forged by duty, and duty was a language spoken without tenderness. Yet even as she tried to swallow the hurt, something inside her had changed. She walked more slowly. She spoke less. She did not look toward the manor on the hill when passing through town. But the Duke looked for her. He arrived one afternoon at the small lending library where she volunteered, not with entourage or fanfare, but alone. Snow clung to the hem of his coat. His gloves were removed carefully, placed upon the counter as if the simple act required intention. Evelyn felt her breath tighten. She greeted him with a polite nod, nothing more. "I fear I owe you apology," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the discomfort of a man who was not used to exposing faults. Evelyn smiled faintly. "We owe each other nothing, Your Grace." Nothing was promised. Something flickered across his expression, pain, perhaps, or realization. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "May I walk with you? Only a short distance." The request was gentle, almost hesitant. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They walked along the riverbank, where winter reeds bent beneath frost. The world seemed suspended between seasons, part ice, part thaw. The Duke spoke of matters unrelated to the ball at first, the new ranching contracts, the territorial disputes, the coming spring shipments. Only when silence settled did he say, with careful restraint, "You are a comfort to me in ways I cannot speak to others." The words were honest, and that made them worse. Comfort was not love. Comfort was safe, replaceable. She swallowed the ache. "I am glad to be of service," she replied, though her voice wavered. He stopped walking. She continued a few paces before turning back to him. He removed something from inside his coat, a small velvet pouch. He held it out, not with flourish, but with the gravity of offering something that mattered. "For you." She hesitated, then accepted it. Inside was a hairpin of delicate silverwork, shaped like a sprig of wild sage. Beautiful, thoughtful, intimate. Her heart trembled. To receive such a gift from a man of his rank, in private, was as good as a declaration, yet he offered no accompanying words. No promise. No future. Just solace dressed in silver. She thanked him quietly and left him by the riverbank before emotion betrayed her. That night, she placed the hairpin on her bedside table and simply stared at it, as though it held all her unanswered questions. But Redcrest was not a town where secret gestures remained secret long. 2 days later, a cold rain swept across the settlement, sudden and sharp. Evelyn had stepped out of the general store when the storm broke. She clasped her shawl close, but the wind caught it, knocking it aside. Before she could gather it back, a hand placed a coat over her shoulders, not heavy wool, not tailored elegance, but a practical, well-worn coat smelling faintly of pine and saddle leather. "Storm came quicker than the sky promised," said Thomas Hale, the quiet gentleman who had recently arrived from the East, a man of education, gentle manner, and the kind of steady warmth that did not draw attention to itself. He held an umbrella, shielding her without presumption. Evelyn exhaled softly. "Thank you. I should have watched the clouds more carefully." He smiled, not pitying, not adoring, simply earnest. "No one can outsmart weather, especially out here." They walked together toward her lodging, keeping to the boardwalk. The gesture was innocent, the interaction brief, and yet a pair of society matrons, sheltered beneath the awning of the milliner's shop, saw everything. By evening, the town hummed with a new version of the story. She entertains more than one admirer. She seeks the Duke's attention by way of jealousy. Perhaps she was never modest to begin with. The cruelty struck deeper this time, for it was not merely humiliation, it was accusation. Evelyn felt the judgment like needles along her skin. She considered explaining. She considered defending herself. But dignity held her silent. Explanations offered to gossip rarely satisfied truth. It was the Duke's reaction, however, that cut the deepest. She saw him at the post road the following afternoon, where riders and carriages gathered before dispersing across the territory. He approached with his usual control, but the warmth in his eyes had thinned, replaced by something guarded. "I hear you were seen in the company of Mr. Hale," he said. His tone was neither jealous nor wounded, just distant, as though he were already stepping away. Evelyn held his gaze. "He offered me his coat in the rain. Nothing more." The Duke nodded, but the gesture felt like a door being gently closed. "I see." Those two words held an entire withdrawal, one so subtle, yet so final it stole breath. She returned home with her composure intact, though her hands shook as she reached her room. She sat at her small vanity and looked at the hairpin again, gleaming quietly in the fading light. A token of affection never named. She lifted it carefully, then froze. It was broken. A clean fracture down the delicate silver spine, as if snapped deliberately or crushed beneath something heavy. She did not know how it had happened, only that the meaning had changed. Something once full of possibility now lay in pieces. She curled her fingers around the broken halves, pressing them to her chest, though the metal felt cold, unyielding. Outside, the rain fell harder. The river swelled. The town whispered. And somewhere beyond the storm, the Duke rode alone across the wide, desolate prairie, trying not to feel what he could no longer ignore. The days turned sharper after the hairpin broke, as if winter itself had taken offense. The wind swept down from the distant canyons, rattling shutters, bending the bare cottonwoods along the riverbank. The streets of Redcrest grew quiet, voices low and watchful. Evelyn carried herself through these days with the same measured grace she always had, yet something within her moved differently now. She did not avoid the Duke. She simply stopped expecting him. People noticed that too. Mr. Hale, with his gentle eyes and thoughtful silences, continued to greet her kindly at the library, offering quiet conversation about novels, about the East, about anything that did not bruise the heart. There was a steadiness to him, a warmth like lamplight rather than fire. She appreciated him, though she did not reach for him. He did not push. He simply remained present, a reminder that kindness did not need grand rooms or titles to feel rich. But the Duke, he was not steady. He was a man held upright by habit and duty, and now that habit had cracked, duty no longer masked the storm beneath. He sought her less in public and more in shadow. A glimpse of him at the trading post doorway. The passing of his horse along the ridge path near the river. A quiet presence outside the chapel after Sunday service, though he did not approach. He watched her, but did not speak. Until the morning frost turned the river edge to silver. Evelyn walked the narrow path beside the water, her cloak pulled close, her breath visible in the cold. The sky was the pale gray of untouched ash. The world held a silence too complete to last. She heard hoofbeats before she saw him. The Duke dismounted with a smoothness born of years in the saddle. No entourage. No ceremony. His coat was dusted with frost, his hair slightly wind-tossed, the image of a man stripped of the armor of society. When he stepped toward her, there was no pretense left. "Evelyn," he said, her name quiet, but the sound of it carried like a struck chord. She did not move. "Your Grace." He flinched, though the motion was slight. Her distance had weight now. He had given it shape. "I have wished to speak with you," he began. "Yet you did not." Her voice was controlled, though soft. "Not when it mattered." He drew in a slow breath. "I did not know how." The wind stirred between them, rattling the dead reeds. She looked at him then, really looked, at the exhaustion in his eyes, at the rigidity of his shoulders, at the pride and loneliness warring beneath his skin. "What is it you wish to say?" she asked. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he seemed to search for words, as if the language of his upbringing had no vocabulary for vulnerability. When he finally spoke, his voice was roughened at the edges. "You have no idea what you are to me." The world went still. Her heart stopped, though she kept her face composed. "My life has been a series of expectations," he continued. "From birth, every decision was chosen. How I speak, how I stand, whom I may love." The last word struck him as he said it. "I have been admired, obeyed, even adored. But I have never been seen. Not as a man, only as a title." She said nothing. He stepped closer. "With you, I am not a title," he said. "I am simply myself. And that has frightened me more than I care to admit." His voice trembled, not in weakness, but in truth. Evelyn's breath caught, but she held her ground. "Then why silence? Why distance? Why let others speak in your place?" He closed his eyes briefly, as though the memory of that night pained him still. "Because I feared that if I acknowledged what I felt, I would lose control of it. I have been told all my life that desire leads to ruin, and affection to vulnerability. I believed that keeping you near, yet unnamed, was safer than risking what lies beyond." Her gaze softened, not in forgiveness, but in understanding. "And in doing so, you left me lonely beside you." He opened his eyes again, and the regret in them was raw. "I thought you understood," he whispered. She drew a slow, careful breath. "I understood that you valued me, but I did not know if you cherished me." Silence settled, heavy as snowfall. He reached into his coat, not for a gift this time, but for the broken hairpin, held gently in his gloved hand. "I found it on the floor near my desk," he said quietly. "It must have fallen and been stepped upon. I kept the pieces because I did not know how to mend them." His voice lowered. "I still do not." Her throat tightened. She reached out, not to take the pieces, but to touch his hand, lightly, barely, the brush of warmth against leather. "Tokens do not mend wounds," she said softly. "Words do. Action does. And truth." He looked at her, as though seeing her again for the first time. "I do not know how to love in the ways that others do," he admitted. "I know how to protect, how to provide, how to stand. But love," his voice broke, "just once. Love requires surrender. And I have spent my life building walls so high I forgot there were gates." The confession hovered in the air between them, fragile, unfinished. Before she could respond, a voice called from the hill path. "Miss Evelyn." She turned. It was Mr. Hale, hat in hand, concern etched across his features. He approached carefully, aware of the charged stillness. "Pardon the interruption," he said gently, "but the storm is moving in fast. You'll be caught out if we don't bring you back soon." She nodded, though her eyes remained on the Duke. Mr. Hale waited, respectful but present. The Duke saw it then, not scandal, not rivalry, but choice. A choice Evelyn had every right to make. He lifted her hand slowly, brushing his thumb across her glove, not claiming, simply grateful. "I ask only this," he said, voice steadying with resolve. "Do not decide your future from pain. If you walk away from me, let it be because your heart is certain, not because mine hesitated when it should have spoken." Her breath trembled, though she did not allow tears. She withdrew her hand gently. "I need time," she said. He bowed his head, not as a duke, but as a man. "Then I will wait." Mr. Hale offered his arm. She accepted, not with passion, nor possession, but because the wind was rising and the world was cold. As they walked toward town, the Duke remained by the river, the broken hairpin still in his hand, the storm rolling toward him. And for the first time in his life, he did not try to command the weather. He simply let the wind come. Spring came not softly but with a sudden, vivid force, as though the land had been holding its breath all winter and could no longer bear the restraint. The river surged with melted snow, trees budded in green, and Redcrest emerged from its frost with restless energy. Carriages returned to the roads, ranch hands whistled on their way to work, and townspeople gathered in clusters to share news and speculation. Life moved quickly, and gossip faster. It was during the first spring fete on the governor's lawn, beneath garlands of wildflowers and lanterns swaying in the fresh breeze, that everything shifted. Evelyn attended at the polite urging of her relatives, though she would have preferred the quiet of the library. She wore a dress of soft cream cotton with simple embroidery at the sleeves, nothing to draw attention, though attention found her regardless. A breeze carried the scent of lilac and churned dust, mingling elegance with the unmistakable grit of the western frontier. Mr. Hale was at her side, speaking gently of books newly arrived by stagecoach. He did not reach for her hand or lean too near, yet the air between them carried a warmth that did not need to be spoken. She appreciated his steadiness, the ease with which he allowed silence to breathe. She found herself smiling faintly at something he said. That was the moment the Duke saw them. He had arrived minutes before, his presence unmistakable even in a crowd. Tall, sharply dressed in dark blue, hair brushed neatly back, he moved with a quiet intensity that parted conversations without a word. But where once his gaze had been distant, guarded, now it was unmistakably raw. He watched Evelyn laugh softly at Mr. Hale's comment, and something inside him, something long shielded, fractured. He had told himself he could give her time. That patience was noble. That restraint was dignity. But patience had turned to torment, and dignity to a slow suffocation. Seeing her smile in the company of another man did not merely trouble him, it stole the breath from his chest. It revealed the truth he had tried again and again to deny. He loved her. Not as comfort, not as solace, not as quiet companionship. He loved her with a force capable of destroying the walls he had spent a lifetime building. And he could not watch her slip away. He crossed the lawn without hesitation. Conversations around them faltered, curiosity lifting heads like prairie dogs from burrows. Mr. Hale noticed first, offering a polite nod. "Your Grace." The Duke returned a brief acknowledgement, but his gaze remained fixed on Evelyn. "May I speak with you?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but trembling beneath the surface. Evelyn's breath caught, but she nodded. Mr. Hale stepped back with quiet respect, understanding written in his features. Whatever happened next, he would not stand as obstacle. The Duke led her a short distance away, only far enough for privacy, not secrecy. The garden was bright with blossoms, the sunlight golden, the air alive. Yet the space between them felt heavy with all that had been unsaid. He spoke first. "I believed I could be patient. I believed I could let time decide what lay between us. But time has only shown me the depth of my folly." His voice grew unsteady, stripped of noble composure. "When I saw another man look at you with tenderness, I discovered I could not draw breath." Evelyn's heart trembled, but she held her ground. "You speak now, when others have already shaped the story of us in whispers." "I know," he said, "and I would undo that pain if I could." He stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that the warmth of him reached her through the spring air. "I have lived a life of distance. I believed closeness meant weakness. And yet you," he swallowed, "you have undone me." The words rang true, unpolished and real. Evelyn's hands tightened faintly at her sides. "I was willing to be patient too," she said, "to allow you the time you needed to understand your heart. But you left me alone in a moment when I needed you. I learned then that silence wounds worse than anger." His gaze softened, not with pity, but with reverence for her courage. "You are right to demand more, and I cannot offer half measures any longer." She searched his expression, looking for the old carefully sealed composure, yet it was gone. What she saw instead was fear, grief, longing, and certainty. "What is it you ask of me?" she whispered. His voice dropped to something quiet, earnest, unguarded. "Not obedience, nor gratitude, nor convenience. I ask to earn your love, to stand beside you, not above you, to be the man you deserve, not the title I was taught to uphold." She inhaled slowly, her pulse quickening. "And if my heart is uncertain, then I will wait," he replied. "I will court you publicly, with honesty. Not hidden gestures or quiet corners. I will not ask you to be my solace in secret. I will ask you to be my equal, before all who would dare to whisper." A silence stretched, a fragile, breath-held pause. Evelyn looked toward the fete, the music, the laughing guests, the world that would not hesitate to judge. Then back to him, the man who had finally stepped down from the pedestal others had placed him on. "You must understand," she said softly, "that if I choose you, I do so freely. Not because of your title. Not because others expect it." Pain flickered through his expression at the suggestion. "I would accept no other reason." She nodded once, steady but trembling. "Then I will decide, when my heart has clarity, not before." The Duke did not argue, did not press, did not plead. He simply bowed his head in respect to her strength, her choice, her dignity. And in that moment, something shifted, not just between them, but within him. He finally understood that love was not claimed. It was chosen. The wind stirred the blossoms overhead. The music continued in the distance. But neither moved, caught in a moment that felt both fragile and infinite. Evelyn looked up at him, her voice barely above breath. "Do not fail me again." His reply was simple. "I will not." And though decision had not yet been made, the reckoning had begun. Twilight gathered over Redcrest with a hush, as though the land itself understood the gravity of what was coming. The chapel at the edge of town, built of pale timber and riverstone, glowed with candlelight spilling through its windows. The bells had long since finished their evening toll, yet Evelyn remained inside, sitting in one of the middle pews, her hands folded in her lap. The world outside was alive with spring, frogs chirping near the floodplain, soft wind moving through budding cottonwoods, but in her chest, stillness reigned. She had spent the days since the fete in deep silence, speaking to no one of what weighed on her. Mr. Hale had visited the library, offering companionship without expectation, but she felt the distance growing between them. Not from his doing, but from her heart's quiet shifting. And the Duke, he had kept his promise. He had not pressed, had not appeared unannounced, had not watched her from afar. But Redcrest spoke of him differently now. They said he carried himself with new humility, that he lingered near the workers at his ranch, speaking with them not as a commander but as a man, that he walked among the townspeople without pretense. Something in him had changed, and she could not pretend she did not feel it. The chapel doors opened behind her. Footsteps entered, measured, quiet, familiar. She did not turn, not at first, but her heart lifted to meet him before her eyes did. The Duke stopped a respectful distance away. "May I sit?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. He took the place beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to share breath, warmth, and unspoken history. The candles flickered softly, pools of gold reflected in the polished wood. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I came," he said at last, "not to sway you, not to plead, only to answer the question you asked me." Her eyes remained forward. Which question was that? He exhaled, the breath carrying months of restraint. "Is it love or loneliness you fear?" He paused, gathering strength from some place long locked away. "I know the answer now." Evelyn's fingers curled slightly, but she did not interrupt. "I feared loneliness," he said, "but not because I am unused to solitude. I feared losing you. I feared wanting something I might not deserve. But that fear no longer guides me." His voice deepened, stripped of every layer of nobility. "If you chose another, I would grieve, but I would not break. What would break me is living with the knowledge that I did not tell you the truth when I had the chance." The candles crackled, their light trembling. "And the truth," she whispered. He turned to her then, fully, openly. "That I love you," he said. "Not as comfort, not as possession, not as habit. I love you as the one who sees me, not the title, not the inheritance, not the lineage. You see the man I have always tried to hide from the world." Her breath caught, sharp and quiet. He continued, voice unsteady but unwavering. "I once believed love required grandeur, or silence. But it requires neither. It requires courage. And this, his hand pressed lightly against his chest, just over his heart. This has been courage delayed far too long. Evelyn's eyes glistened, not with sudden joy, but with a slow, aching relief of wounds long tended finally healing. She drew a trembling breath. You asked to be chosen freely. Yet do you understand what that freedom requires? Yes, he murmured. It requires that I accept your answer, whatever it may be. Silence settled again. The wind stirred outside, rattling the chapel roof. Somewhere in the distance, a horse stamped in its stall. Evelyn rose slowly. He stood too, instinctively, though without reaching for her. She walked a few steps toward the altar, not in flight, but in thought. Her hand brushed the polished wood. She closed her eyes. When I first came to Redcrest, I believed I would live quietly, she said. I thought dignity could be my shelter, that I could survive without being known. But you saw me, truly saw me, and I did not realize how rare that was. She turned, meeting his gaze without hesitation now. Yet you also wounded me, not by cruelty, but by withholding what I needed to hear. I needed certainty. I needed name. I needed acknowledgement, not as rumor or suggestion or implication, but as truth. She stepped toward him. One step, then another, each one steady. And now, she said, voice gentle but sure, you have given me that truth. She reached for his hand, not urgently, not trembling, but with a quiet, unmistakable claim. The Duke exhaled, a sound of disbelief, gratitude, and all at once. He closed his fingers around hers, his composure shattering into something raw and human. Her next words were soft enough to break him completely. I choose you. He bowed his forehead to hers. No grand kiss, no sweeping embrace, just closeness, intimate and sacred. When they did finally kiss, it was slow, reverent, shaped by months of silence and longing. It felt not like a beginning, but like coming home. And yet the story did not end there. For as they stepped from the chapel into the cool twilight, lanterns flickering along the main road, people began to notice. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A hush fell across the street. But this time, there were no whispers. Because Evelyn did not let go of his hand. And the Duke did not hide. They walked side by side, not scandal, not rumor, but truth made visible. Chosen. Freely.